Alright, got some original content for you tonight. As always, this is a horror story, so listener discretion is advised. This one features a werewolf, and you can imagine the kind of things a werewolf gets up to. Anyway, have a great week, and I will catch you at the end. I might have accidentally caused a national manhunt and a murder mystery that'll never be solved. Well, not never. I'm solving it for you right now. Not that this story would ever be taken seriously by anyone with any power in the legal system. At best, I'll get picked up by some supermarket tabloid or spewed on some YouTube channel for late-night horror junkies. If that's you, hello! This is a confession to precisely 3 murders in a small town of about 20,000 folks. Well, I'm not a lawyer. But the first was closer to manslaughter than to a murder. It was entirely an accident. An accident resulting from a lapse in judgment that resulted in death, sure. I think the legal definition of murder considers intent. And I did it without intent. I was also responsible for the death of the town sheriff. Not directly, but it wouldn't have happened had I not screwed up so badly. We'll call that one indirectly my fault. Either way, I'm posting this here, and I'm going to print a paper copy and leave it on the table of my rental unit. By the time you read this, I'm going to be long gone. I'm not bumping myself off. I'm honestly not even sure I could at this point. But I am going to change my name and radically alter my face and throw away this entire life. So, in a way, this person is dying, but I won't be. Consider this confession a form of catharsis. It all started at the end of May. The town I used to live in had a community college, not a full-blown university. And with finals done, seniors graduating, 22-year-olds wandering off to get a job or join the military or, heaven forbid, boomerang back home to their parents, the group of the more well-to-do 20-somethings, the ones who didn't have to rent a dorm room, they were having a huge block party. 3 or 4 rent houses were side by side, and they had kegs of beer, ping pong tables, pool tables, grills. Just a fun time with loud music. And of course, cheap greasy pizza. Now, as a soft-spoken art student who was never really too comfortable being a social butterfly, this was not my scene. But one of my friends begged me to go. Kim. She was the forever friend zone, and wanted to bring me to play wingman. I do not know if she wanted me to play wingman for her or vice versa, before she went out of state. Kim, if you're reading this, what went down, it's not your fault. There's a huge series of unknown unknowns. Given the proximity to the full moon, I really didn't want to go to this party. There would be booze and sensory overload and the smell of fresh meat in the air from the grills. But Kim did beg me to come along, and it was supposed to be overcast, if not outright raining on and off all night. It's not like you could see the full moon behind the clouds. I weighed my options and decided to live a little. Dad, of course, told me not to go, but you know how that goes. Him forbidding it just made me want to party more. And for the first 2 hours or so, it was great. The music got turned up, the beer flowed. I ate a burger and it was delicious. I have a thing for meat. I even found myself a little buzzed, chatting with people, mingling. It was a great time. I'm glad that I went, at least up until that point. Everyone I knew, and a lot of people I didn't know, were there. Somewhere in the house hopping, and the cookouts, and the music, things really started to ramp up after dark. The harder liquor came out. It wasn't just beer anymore, it was spirits. The party drugs came out. Do you have any idea how overpowering the smell of burning weed is when you have superhuman senses? Even in my dulled, intoxicated state, it was getting to be a bit too much. I was just about to leave, and now I kind of wish I would have. Then there was the cute blonde, Ashley Cartwright. She rolled up to me as I sat on the bed in the upstairs bedroom of this rent house, listening to some music on the stereo system. She broke up the quiet conversation with a couple of my friends by putting her arms around my neck. She called me her daddy wolf. Oh, God. Had she seen my fur affinity page? I hope not. It didn't help that I'm 5'0" and had to look up to her when she dragged me up off the bed. Before I knew it, she'd led me to the stereotypical party bathroom. This is the place where you would do lines of coke or have casual sex behind a closed door at a house party. Yeah, there was one of those. And there was the short little line when we started. Third or fourth in line, I forget now. Anyway, she eventually got me in there and unbuttoned my shirt. And I wanted this. I won't lie. She was beautiful, and she wasn't judging me. I was short and I was kind of nerdy, and having this blonde bombshell all over me was going to be one of the most magical nights of my life. So we started making out, and it all felt really, really right. It flowed. The moment, it was great. And then the moment shattered. The nightmare began. We were kissing and making out, and somewhere in all of that I tasted something in her mouth. I thought maybe, she'd popped in a breath mint or a lozenge or something. Drown out the taste of the beer. No. It numbed my tongue on contact. Real strong. Burning medicine taste. Think tongue-kissing a Listerine bottle in a hospital. Super chemically. And from there, the next few minutes got very, very hazy. It always does when the change comes. It turns out this Ashley chick was into all the weird, new age medicine party drugs. Probably grew a bunch of weird plants in her garden. And for literally anyone else at this party, any other guy, that would have been just fine. But who the hell makes a hard candy party drug out of wolf's bane? I swear, if I ever find out who did that, who ruined my life, I will make them go away. And I might not even bother to change forms to do it. The problem is, I'm a werewolf. And I have been for some number of years now. I suddenly came down with brain cancer as a kid. It messed me up real bad. Dad was from a long line of lycanthropes. Mom is normal and mortal. When Dad's options were to either let his child die or spread the curse, well, I got the fangs. And a miracle cure. A month later, my brain cancer was gone. The doctors had no explanation for it, but I was cleared and life went on. Now, yeah, this is a curse, but I've always been incredibly responsible with it. This is a small town in the southern U.S. with a big hunting culture, and I sort of treated lycanthropy like it was a firearm. You have rednecks and trucks and rifles. Simple enough. There's a lot of forest around this town. So, when you know you're going to change, you keep an eye on the lunar cycle, you wander into the woods on the night of a full moon, and then you always have plans in your waking, daytime, normal person life on that night. You transform, it sort of sucks. Then it's awesome, and then you tear some poor forest critter to pieces, you eat them, you pass out, you change back. Easy money. The worst I ever did with one of my transformations up until this point was I spooked some Bible camp of 9-year-old kids 3 summers ago. I didn't know they were there. They were new in the region, in the forest. But if their goal was to get closer to Jesus, well, they prayed an awful lot that night. I'd argue I caused a net positive. Anyway, I'm getting off track. The point is, up until the night of this party, I had a squeaky clean record. 177 times I'd turned into the wolf. And 177 times I hadn't harmed anyone. I wasn't slated to change on the night of the party. It was close. It was a waxing moon. The change was coming up. But this chick just had to have wolfsbane in her mouth. That's bad. In a human, wolfsbane is poison. A small dose will make you locally numb and maybe reduce your fever. It's old medicine. A medium dose will push you into this state of excitement that risks a seizure. You have huge thirst, high body temperature, a heart racing all by itself. Classical poisoning symptoms that's a result of exposure to an alkaloid. In a large dose, your heart stops. Well, it doesn't stop, it vibrates in your chest in a way that doesn't pump blood, and that's the ballgame. You go from I have a headache to I will never have a headache again. In a werewolf, it's a little different. There's the same chemical spike to your muscles, including your heart. But because of the lycanthropy, it can trigger a premature change, particularly if you're close to a lunar cycle. Now, when you change, you want to be outside on dirt, not in a tiny bathroom. You shed all of your skin, all of your bones break, all of your muscles rearrange, your skull reshapes itself, your whole biology rewrites itself. It's how Dad could save my life with a single bite. You can't have cancer if your physical form completely redesigns itself every 28 days. The schematic doesn't call for a tumor. Well, the change happened in this bathroom. I wasn't on dirt. That entire bathroom was coated in my blood and viscera, and what was kind of like happy, pleasant moans turned into screams of pain. There were some primordial howls at the end of the screams of pain. Those are part and parcel with the transformation. Now, of course, music was blasting and everyone was drunk and doing drugs, smoking pot, doing keg stands. They just assumed someone was having a very good time behind closed doors, at least for a couple of minutes. Now, for this blonde dream girl who'd yanked me into this bathroom, she was hit with a piece of my old skin the size of a bath towel. Absolutely coated in my blood, screaming her head off. In her shoes, I imagine I'd be absolutely freaked out too. In the blink of an eye, she had gone from Flower Child to the scene from Carrie. Now, it gets worse, of course. Because I am not the wolf, and he is not me. But him and I try to get along. He'll pop up in my dreams, he'll pop up in some of my artwork, and if I look over my shoulder in the mirror at my reflection, he's always there. There can only be one of us in the driver's seat at once, so to speak. And believe me, as hard as I could, I urged him not to hurt that girl. But he wasn't having any of it. She had just popped his identity out in an enclosed space with a ton of people around and was making noise and drawing more attention to the scene. I mean, she was screaming, but she was drawing more attention to the scene. So even with me screaming my head off inside of him in my own inner monologue, stop, stop, he brought out his teeth and claws. I could maybe see one bite, quick and clean. Crush her windpipe, no air, no sound, no screams, no problem. But of course the dude has no chill. She ended up in pieces all over the inside of that bathroom. I ate some of her. Now that only added to the blood and viscera of the overall crime scene. And then he paused, just for a moment. This was now a crime scene, he was right. He picked up what was left of my shredded blue jeans, which were red jeans now. They were bright crimson on the floor. He glanced in the mirror and he gave me this really apologetic look. I was now outside of his hulking gray form in the reflection. Reality was reversed. He was no longer the reflection in the mirror. I was the reflection in the mirror. Obviously, I was only visible to him, just as the wolf is only visible to me when I see my own reflection. He can't really speak. But the look he gave me, I knew he was going to do something else bad. It wasn't done. Then, in one smooth motion, he popped my wallet into his maw. He tipped his head back and swallowed it the same way you'd swallow your morning vitamins. I felt it hit bottom and began to sizzle in that horrific lupine stomach acid. That damn wolf still owes me $100 for that. But I get his point. You can't rip someone to shreds and then leave your ID with the body. That would be a really short episode on Investigation Discovery. A quick jab of his claw, and the battery pack on my blood-soaked smartphone ruptured as the entire unit burst into flames. Maybe he owes me a little more than $100, come to think of it. Then, in one smooth motion, he processed that one of the local football players was bashing into the bathroom door. I guess the dude finally got broken out of his drunken stupor and got alerted to the screams that got cut short, followed by all of the ripping and tearing and snarling. So Wolf Me, he makes a massive jump and flings himself out of the window above the shower. He passed through the glass the same way you or I would pass through a spider web, and then he sprinted off into the rainstorm. I came to the next day. I was butt-ass naked in the tool shed behind my house, just sprawled on the floor. Wolf Me lacks fine motor control. So, figuring out a combination lock while shapeshifted into a werewolf? Nah, he wasn't having any of it. He ripped the entire latch off of the tool shed. After last night and an unplanned transformation, my everything ached. The worst, though, is that Dad was already stood there, shed door closed, overhead light on, with that one stupid yellow dangling bulb over his head. He was leaned backwards against a cluttered workbench, clipboard in his hand, uniform on. It was early afternoon by the time I came around. The police radio in his hip was chattering pretty much constantly, and the folks at the other end of the airwaves, they sounded busy. Well, considering your current state, and how busy my night and morning have been, I'm assuming your night didn't go so well, did it, son? His gaze never left the clipboard. You better tell me what went down. Oh, what could I do? I told him. And the kids at the party said they saw something gray go through the window? I'm assuming that was you. The other you. Even my wolf whined inside of my head. I might have been a werewolf for 15 years, but there's photos of my dad going back to the Civil War when photography was invented, and he looked the same in black and white with that handlebar mustache. So what do I need to do? So here's how this goes down. Your skin and blood and DNA are all over the inside of that bathroom. As far as the coroner's office is concerned, you were a murder victim too. You're going to stay home, get some damn clothes on, lay low, and not speak to anyone. No phone, no internet, no contact with anyone but me and your mother. Treat it like you're a child in the 1980s and you're grounded. I'm going to tell the public that my son was a victim and the department is looking for the murderer. I'm going to put on my best sad father face whenever the topic of you comes up. You have another change coming up tomorrow night. After that, we're going to do that thing you and I talked about since last Christmas. There wasn't any arguing with him, man or beast. I nodded. He'd already brought some clothes down for me. I got up and got my underwear and then my pants and shirt on. All right, lay low a couple of days, one more change, then skip town. Got it. Of course, Dad shook me down with that. He wanted to make sure that I got it. He prompted me to change my face. You know, what I'm supposed to look like needs to be modified. Lycanthropy comes with being a shapeshifter. I groaned a bit and focused, and then I radically altered my appearance. I ended up about 6 inches taller, different nose, different eye color. My hair fell out. What was curly black came back as straight blonde. My skin tone darkened 3 shades. It ached a lot to do such a transformation. After a long wince, I put on my best surfer voice and composed myself. So, brah, it's time for me to make myself scarce. Dad sighed and ran a hand along his face. Work on it. I have so much work to do now. And check in with your mother. She's worried sick. And with that, Dad went back to work. Being the town sheriff in a quiet southern town with a low violent crime rate, I must have just caused him a tremendous headache. He just went from Andy Griffin to CSI. I checked in with my mom. She was in shambles, of course, because she understood what all this meant. She intended well, but I'm not sure what to even do or tell her in that situation. I can't imagine how difficult it is being married to a werewolf and having a lycanthrope son. That should have been the end of it. I wish I could say that I skipped town after the next full moon. But that's not the whole truth. It got worse. So it turns out the girl, Ashley, the flower child from the party who caught me off guard with the wolfsbane candy. Damn, I hate whoever made wolfsbane candy. She had friends. Of course she did. And unfortunately, her friends were into the whole pajama pants true crime drama genre of life. They thought of themselves as like Scooby-Doo or Investigation Discovery or something. They started snooping around. There were enough eyeballs on the scene and on my family as it stood. As far as the public knew, the son of the county sheriff just got murdered. Even with this new face, I couldn't just be this strange person hanging around the house. I had to make myself scarce and disappear into the woods. Obviously, in the modern day, there's no shot I could touch anything electronic. Google knows more about you than the FBI does. That was already enough of a pain in my ass. But 2 nights later, during the next change, I was just trying to keep a low profile. It had gone well enough. The family had some land a couple of miles from town. It's an old hunting lodge. And I had just swallowed an entire rabbit. Kind of felt bad for the little guy, but wolf me is going to do what he's going to do. And then there was this flash of light. It was followed with a muffled argument and whispers. Are you freaking kidding me? The wolf, of course, gave chase. There were 2 college-age kids, one male, one female. They hopped on a 4-wheeler and roared out of there as I charged at them. Now, certainly, my alter ego was faster than a 4-wheeler, but they had a pretty big head start. The zoom on that camera was impressive. I quickly closed the gap, but I had to be careful. If I landed a random scratch or bite, if it was not fatal, it would spread the curse and confirm everything. So, as I'm lining up my claws and teeth, of course they crash right through the chain link fence of a marine company. Of course they do. There's a boat manufacturing plant out here, and there was a night shift working with a bunch of floodlights on. For the same reason, or maybe a similar reason, that the family lives a couple of miles away from the city proper, lycanthropy gonna lycanthrope, the marine company operates a factory out here in the country. And they do so because making boats is loud, and nobody wants that in downtown. It messes up the tourist industry. They didn't even slow down the ATV when they rammed the fence. So now there's security cameras everywhere and night shift workers in a panic as loud noises and these 2 are yelling and screaming and causing a real spectacle. I had to back off. I laid low and I tracked the 2 by scent. Eventually they got their ATV loaded into the bed of a red Chevrolet truck. And by now, of course, the marine company, whatever manager was on duty, had called the cops, and one of the deputies who works with my dad had come out to question them. Well, having superior hearing, I sat around and eavesdropped on the conversation. It got me names and an address. The next part was simple enough to rectify. The wolf even did his best to help me out. There's some long-abandoned forest cabin out there from, the early 1900s. He ripped a plank of wood off of it, and he used one of the... I can't even call it a 2x4. It's whatever size plank it was. And he used one of his claws, and he did his best to write down the details for these 2, basically etching it into the wood. His pen control sucks, but I appreciate the effort. It was hardly legible, but hardly legible is how all of my notes from high school and college had been anyway, so I could translate it. The next day, when I changed back, I did a bit of stalking on my own. The guy was Jake Ashcraft. He had graduated from the local high school a year after I did. He worked at the gas station in town. His girlfriend was about his age, and she worked across the street. Chloe Evans. She's a waitress at the pizza parade. Now, being 20-somethings, they had late shifts. God forbid someone my age be up before the break of noon. That night, under cover of darkness, and while they were at work, I simply shimmed the lock to Jake's place. I wasn't the wolf. I had fine motor control. But, I'm still substantially faster and stronger than most run-of-the-mill humans, particularly this close to a full moon. Jake had left his computer unlocked, so I slipped on some stair-like gloves, and I deleted all the posts he'd made to social media about the Werewolf of Blue Creek, and I left. Just in case he had some sort of doorbell camera, or some sort of home security system, of course, I altered my appearance to look just like Chloe. Then I darted through the forest, and I got on a bicycle. I couldn't risk having my car seen in town since I was quote-unquote deceased. So I pedaled my ass off and I came up to Chloe's place. After some snooping around, it turns out she lives alone too, in a single-wide trailer at the edge of the forest. And one of the windows in her kitchen was damaged by rain and pooling water. Thank God she hadn't invested in quality gutters. A quick tug and the metal latch sort of dug and bit free from the wood frame. I shimmied through her kitchen window and found my way to her bedroom. Her laptop was signed in, propped up on a board on her bed. Rinse and repeat, and of course while I'm at Chloe's place, I look like Jake. I got rid of all of her social media posts. But then it dawned on me. Jake still had the photo on his phone, and judging by what he had uploaded to YouTube Shorts, a shockingly high-quality video of me chasing and snarling at him. Damn it. So I had to go scope out the mom-and-pop gas station from the trees across the road. If memory serves, he was friends with someone named Jeff, who had turned into sort of the local meathead and bodybuilder, and probably steroids dealer. So I strained really hard behind an old pine tree, and turned into the most convincing Jeff that I could. I came in, paid cash, and bought a diet soda. Do bodybuilders drink soda? If so, they can't possibly do corn syrup. And some beef jerky. The real crime here is the price of gas station beef jerky. Aw, dude, I left my phone at home. I need to call my girl and tell her I'm running late. Looking like his friend put his guard down just enough. Had I come to buy gas? Well, no, of course not. I didn't even arrive by car. But he went with it. Jake slid me his phone, unlocked. I fiddled with it for a moment, and quickly deleted the images from his camera roll. Then I needed to actually make it look like I was on a phone call, so thinking fast, I called a 1-800 number and did the best performance of my life. I told an automated machine how much I loved her, and I'd be there shortly, and don't you dare start without me because I don't want to miss a minute of this. It was the 1-800 number that was up on the wall for the gas station's brand of fleet credit cards for your business-to-business account to buy fuel on. If anyone was on that switchboard that night, they obviously had a huge laugh at my expense. So I deleted the 1-800 number from his call logs and I handed the phone back. Thanks, bro! You're a lifesaver! And I sprinted for the door and made my escape into the night. After all, I was Jeff and I was running late for a date. Now that should have been the end of it. No photos, no video, no social media post, no werewolf. But, of course, the real Jeff just happened to roll up. I swerved sideways and dove behind a dumpster that stunk of fried chicken. He went in and hung out with Jake, and I could already tell by the confused conversation that the gig was up. Those two were pointing really sharp questions at each other, and although I couldn't distinctly make out the words through the brick mortar of the building, I could tell they knew something was super fishy. So I ran back off into the woods, I reverted back into the surfer, and I hopped on my bicycle and fled. I swear to God fate is conspiring against me. Crazy chick with wolfsbane mints as a party drug, Jeff rolling in seconds after I left the store. This is stupid, but at least the evidence was gone. I could say my goodbyes to my family, get the hell out of here, and laugh about just how hard I dodged this bullet later. And, of course, feel a little bad for Ashley, because she didn't really deserve what she got. So Dad checked in with me. We had a meeting spot in a particular place in the forest. It's not exactly at our family's hunting cabin, but it's, in proximity. I won't give away the exact position. I can't give you all my secrets in this confession. It's a helpful spot. Not so far from the cabin, not so far from the house. Dad, of course, had gone through his own transformation under the same full moon as me. But because of how long he's been at this, he was much more fluid and much more in control. His wolf sort of phases through in the daytime, and he sort of phases through during the full moon. They get along swimmingly. Honestly, I think he could probably do his taxes as a werewolf at this point. He simply told the other cops that he needed to go home and be with his wife given the current circumstances, which they all entirely believed. That's a free transformation. And it wasn't entirely a lie. You see, when Dad met up with me in our clearing in the forest, Mom was there too. She wanted to at least give me a hug. I assume my parents had just sort of locked up the house and left some lights on with the curtains drawn and come out here on foot. We'd all kind of known this day was going to happen at some point, and given my recent college graduation, which I suppose now I'm going to be one of those kids that's a photograph where they give a diploma to my parents, it was all sort of on the horizon anyway, but it got thrust on us. As part of the preparation for this, just in case I needed to bail, sophomore year of college, Mom and Dad had bought me this real piece of crap car. It is the definition of low profile. It was a 1994 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme that had, allegedly at one point, been blue, but it had faded to a mix of gray and rust. It was for sale for cheap on Facebook Marketplace. Dad picked it up right after the pandemic from some old person's estate for like $1,000, when the deceased old-timer's kid just didn't want to deal with it. A lot of stuff was busted on this car, but for the last 2 years, every week or so, I'd go out and work on it a little bit. It was not parked at the house. It was not tightly coupled to the family. And since the family had this hunting lodge down a dirt road several miles from town, the car was parked there behind the building. It ran, it functioned, it was transportation, but it wasn't glamorous. In truth, the hunting camp wasn't so far from where I'd encountered the snooping would-be e-celebrities. In our kind of last family get-together here, Mom handed me a card with a big wad of $100 bills in it. She gave me this huge hug. It was like going off to college, but it was going off to life. Given we might not see each other again for months, maybe years, I really sincerely appreciated the gesture. And given that I wouldn't have a great option to relay information to my father, I brought up the photograph, the would-be forest spies, and the social media shutdown. At the time, he sort of laughed it off, but he did promise to keep an eye on that particular group of friends, just in case. From there, it was a short walk. They were going to salvage the situation, see me off, make it as good of a formal goodbye as we could. We made it to the hunting lodge. What I was not anticipating is as we came out of the trees to this hunting lodge, that same red Chevy pickup truck was parked there. The journalistic duo were out with their flashlights and smartphones, and they were snooping around and taking pictures. No way. Was it because this place was vaguely close to the marine manufacturing plant where I had chased them? I guess, legally speaking, we were the next property over. Hey, check out these claw marks on the trees. Those look like the bathroom from the party house. I hung back in the woods, and even though this was a werewolf business, Dad could solve the problem without any deception. He had me and my mother stay behind in the trees. Then, with stiff legs and shoulders up, he walked out in his sheriff uniform and he met the pair. "May I help you two?" Chloe screamed and nearly jumped out of her skin. She dropped her light and, with 2 hands, had to make a series of grabs to save her smartphone before it hit the earth. "Sheriff McNeely, hi! I didn't realize anyone else was out here," Jake stepped in, interposing between my dad and his girlfriend. This was like watching a chess game and trying to predict the moves. Now, naturally, Dad was going to ask them to leave. That's the conclusion. But what steps would happen in between? What was the middle game? Dad crossed his arms, puffed up his chest, and took a deep breath. I recently lost my son at that stupid house party. I told him not to go, but kids y'all's age, you just don't listen. I wanted to back off for a day or two, take a breath, get some perspective. I went for a walk out here to clear my head. Crazy as hell how fast this all went down. After I get a grip of this situation, my intention is to throw the entire weight of my department into this investigation and find out who done that horrible thing to my boy and that poor girl at the party. This here's my lodge. Not that I intend to do any hunting tonight, but my wife is asleep inside, so please keep it down, would you? Why are you two out here poking around my stuff at nearly midnight? Oh, I'm so sorry, Sheriff. Jake sounded sincere. We're Ashley's friends from the party. We just wanted some wind down time after work to kind of process what happened. It's got us shook. I didn't know this was private property. We'll get out of your hair. They started to leave back up the driveway towards their red truck. I really appreciate that, but what's with all the photographs and smartphones and flashlights? You two weren't, casing my place, were you? As an officer of the law, I gotta ask those kind of questions. Dad laughed and played it down, but, his gaze was stern at them. Oh, no, nothing like that. It's gonna sound stupid. Jake cut himself off. He was straining to get out what he wanted to say. Now, son, I've heard a lot of things in my life. I ain't here to judge. That's quite literally the county judge's problem, so let's hear it. He kept the charisma flowing. Well, you're gonna lock me up for drugs for saying this, but hand to God, I am sober. I think there might be a werewolf in this town. Dad processed that for a moment. His face was almost unreadable. The fact that he had Ray-Bans on in the dead of night didn't help. Then he gave a pretty convincing laugh. Not too over the top. He had just lost a son. I'm sorry, I needed that. Now what in the world would make you think that? Well, we were at the block party. Not in the house where it went down, but word traveled fast through the crowd. We were 2 doors down. Isaac's family owns that house and has a pool table. One of the girls from the party busted in screaming about seeing a gray something jump through the window. Then she told us about what happened in the bathroom. Jake turned his light towards a tree at this point. And look at those claw marks. That's fresh sap. That's a recent gouging on that tree. Something tall. Dad sighed, and he pinched the bridge of his nose as he spoke. Look, we're all a little shook up about what happened, but I'm not going to go around and spook people and say a bunch of stuff about some werewolf. There is a sicko on the loose. That's a monster enough. And I'll make it my top priority to get him. You have my word on that. As for the claw marks, you two do realize there's bear in these woods, right? Chloe had a little bit of good sense about her, but not too much. After all, they were already trespassing and taking pictures. Oh, yes, sir, Sheriff. You're a cop, so I'm not going to be too stupid and whip it out. But my dad's big Magnum bear revolver is in my backpack, just in case. Dad laughed, tried to play it down. I appreciate that. Now, y'all go on home before you wake my wife up. Just try to get some rest. This is already a bad situation, and stress is going to make the grief worse. You've got to get your nerves solid, and then you just sort of handle it. I'll be in touch, I promise. All right, good night, Sheriff. And with that, they hopped in the car, they exchanged a nervous glance, then they backed out of the drive and began the slow 5-mile-per-hour ride up to the main highway. For the first time in a long time, I saw Dad pull out a pack of cigarettes from the breast pocket of his shirt. He took one out and lit it up. Even in the dim light, I could see the hairs on the back of his neck were standing up, even beneath his hat. Mom and I slowly came out of the woods. We gave Jake and Chloe several minutes to clear the place and be sure they were gone. Those your snoops? Dad gestured towards the long dirt driveway. He was on his 3rd Marlboro by the time we came up, sort of pacing a little 5-foot circle on the gravel. Yeah, that's them. I was timid in my tone. If my tail were out, it'd be between my legs. They're persistent, I'll give them that. I don't really like that. But poking at them will make it worse. I'll double up on any of my safety precautions when it comes, lunar time, and I'll be really careful. To his credit, as best I could tell, Dad did. After that night, he got more reclusive. Dad would hide and change miles away from civilization, even further back than he normally did. And then he'd be right back at his day job a few hours later with a cup of coffee. I got up early the next day. I grabbed my cash and the fake ID that Dad told me it was best not to ask too much about. I hopped in my rust bucket and I started to leave town. It sucked. But at least I wasn't locked up for my, accident. I felt bad for the girl I ate. That was not my intention. I'm a monster, but not a capital M monster. I have remorse. The wolf in my back seat in the rearview mirror had his ears low. I could kind of tell he felt bad about it too. It was a bittersweet goodbye to the old town. Don't worry, we'll figure it out. We've been practicing our whole lives for this. Just like you, I'm a little disappointed at how it went down, but now it can't be helped. I know. You have to do your wolf stuff. And you weren't expecting to get dragged out like that. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have went to that stupid party. Let's just try to do better from here on out, okay? My monologue got cut short at the very last traffic stop before the highway widened into a 4-lane road and left town. At this particular traffic light, there's a pawn shop. In the parking lot of this pawn shop, there was Jake and Chloe, the would-be wolf hunters. They were walking back to the truck with a huge armload of silver. Necklaces, coins, bars, silverware, a huge heap of the stuff. Dude must have just dropped his entire life savings on it. Well, hell. If he's that serious about this werewolf business, then he's never gonna stop. I made a mental note, but continued to drive, playing it cool. There was a roll of quarters down in my center console. I got them out and laid them on the passenger seat. 2 hours out of my hometown, I stopped. I had to refuel, empty my bladder, and buy some fresh caffeine drinks. This particular truck stop on the interstate had a payphone. So I picked it up, dropped some quarters in, and called the sheriff's office. My voice sounded nothing like the old me in this new shape. The county clerk, an older lady who'd had that job for decades, transferred the call to my dad's desk phone. Hello, sheriff's office. I knew he'd get the code. Dad and I watched Night of the Living Dead every Halloween when I was a kid. Hey, it's George Romero. You the sheriff? I gotta leave an anonymous tip. Dad hesitated for a moment. Now, you gotta understand, being a werewolf comes with moving fast, which means your brain has to keep up. It's a subtle physiological change, but it amplifies over time. Even with his enhancements, he took just a moment to process that. Then he cleared his throat. Yeah, Johnny, go ahead. He picked up his pen. I could kind of hear a subtle smile in his voice. So I saw the ghost hunters getting periodic at the pawn shop. Absolutely loaded down with 47 AGs. I was a good student in school and remembered some of the periodic table. Given my nature and naturally occurring weaknesses, I knew that one for sure. That was the elemental symbol and periodic table number for silver. Dad paused again. I'm pretty sure I heard him shut his office door. Oh, you did? Well, that's too bad. Let me see what I can do about that. Yeah, this is a payphone. I can't talk for long, but you needed to know. Well, I appreciate the heads up. You drive safe out there. And we ended the call. At least he knew. Between Chloe confessing she owned a bear gun and Jake buying a bunch of silver, it didn't take a genius to figure out that they would be trying to make silver bullets. Big ones. That was actually a cause for concern. I had to do something to take my mind off the pressing situation, so as I drove, I did math, sort of muttering to myself as the wolf in the back seat stared into my soul. I had to round the numbers in my head, but as of today, a pound of silver costs $500. There's 7,000 grains to a pound if you're using reloading measurements, 1 grain is then about 7 cents worth of silver. A bullet for a big bear gun, say a .454 Casull or a .460 Smith & Wesson, is about 300 grains. Give or take, that's $21 per bullet in a 5 or 6 shooter Magnum bear gun. Snubby nose, not accounting for the difference in atomic weight between lead and silver, which admittedly is quite girthy. How many bullets could those two particularly make? How many would work and function? And how many could they fire with the financial limitations of a pawn store mock-up? I gave him a chance. What do you think? Yeah, you're right. Even 1 is too many, but at least Dad knows to be on his heels now. It was strange. Normal bullets wouldn't do anything to me as the wolf. In truth, because of this curse and the fact that my form was sort of fluid, most injuries wouldn't do much to me, even as a human. Not that, I had any particular desire to test my limits when it wasn't a full moon, but silver was a special case. The grandmother had taught me that one firsthand. Mom's side, of course. She got me this really nice silver cross necklace on Christmas, right after my 13th birthday. I appreciated the gesture, and to this day I still do, but I can't wear it. After a few hours with it on, my neck had burns all the way around the collar in the shape of the links. You could pick the texture out. I had to put that thing in my mom's jewelry box and call it quits. I bet she still has it. Anyway, I finished my drive. And by finished, I mean I drove all day and crossed 2 state lines. I came to a town that was mostly wooded, and I took a nap in a rest stop. My funds were limited, so a hotel was just not in the cards right now. At least the seat would recline back in this car. After poking around the town for a few days, I found there was a construction company in town who didn't ask too many questions. Show up, shut up, do good work, and they'd pay you every 2 weeks. They didn't even drug test me. I started making friends at my new job pretty fast. Being able to think faster and act faster than my coworkers came in handy. A guy named Nate lost his balance on a ladder, and I ended up catching him in one arm and the ladder with the other. I quietly stood it back up, shoved him back on it, picked up his drill, and told him to be careful. He would have landed on that drill and would have had some kind of horrific injury from the process. He bought me a beer after that. The wolf, of course, didn't much enjoy the smell of paint or roofing tar, but I made it up to him as best I could because I found a local butcher shop and I would hit it up on the regular and buy a bunch of meat that they were about to throw out. From there, I rented a roachy apartment in town. There's no other way to explain it. This apartment was one step up from a no-tell-motel. It was really more to have an address with my new identity in case I ever hit some kind of ID wall. In truth, I was fine with the forest. This town was not so large, maybe 40,000 people. Beyond the city limits was this huge, sprawling pine forest. Next up, I hit the dollar store and I bought a burner phone, paid in cash, set it up with the internet service for my new ID as a pay-as-you-go plan. From there, I could sort of vaguely keep tabs on my past life. Of course, I mixed that with the new people I was meeting, just to not raise too many suspicions. Jake and Chloe were still at it. They were milking this incident for fame. They had, in fact, set up a YouTube channel documenting all of their search for the fabled Werewolf of Blue Creek. It was populated with a couple of video essay-style videos with photographs and a backstory. I sighed at my double reflection in the dark cell phone screen after the video finished. They're not going to let it go, are they? I fired up another one of their videos. They had found a spot deep in the back of the national forest, only really accessible to a four-wheeler or, well, a creature such as myself. Now, this particular spot I didn't know, and I knew those woods pretty well. This spot had a collection of claw marks. Dad, in his altered state, had no doubt gone like 20-something miles back into the forest and marked his territory by clawing up the trees. They picked up a cigarette butt from the ground in the clearing. It was Dad's brand. It was a Marlboro with a green band around it. They bagged it up on video and talked about sending it off to a friend at the university for identification. I had been gone for 6 months, 6 cycles of the moon. And every 28 days, like clockwork, they had posted a big video again. Compiling evidence. It kind of pissed me off. I had to drop the phone to avoid cracking it. And in my head, I could hear the wolf growling. I shut my eyes. I know. Dad's been at this for, God, it must be centuries. Let him sort it out. We do not need to get involved. Still, I wanted to send my mom a text, or get in contact with Dad again and tip him off. But I also really suspected that my family was already being watched. If the state crime lab had looked into the block party murder, then maybe this entire situation had floated as high as the feds. And the feds had the power to subpoena social media sites. One wrong word, one wrong message, and I might get my family in even more trouble. Did I go back in person? Was the house being watched? Even if I swapped up my appearance and got some thrift shop clothing, what if there was like an FBI party van parked across the street from the house? It was infuriating. I could not know how much everyone else knew, other than Jake and Chloe because they never shut up about it on their YouTube channel. I made a mental note, but I reassured myself, both of myselves, that Dad had it under control. His senses were sharp and he was on high alert. However, just to be super safe, I fired up a VPN, and through this VPN, I sent a link to the cigarette butt video from a burner Facebook account to Dad's account, and I made it look super spammy. He was never much of one for social media, so this might have just looked like a spam bot to him, but I prayed that he would at least look at the video before dismissing it. Then I tried to carry on with normal everyday life. I found my own little quiet spot in these woods where I could metamorph. No booze or any other substance for 72 hours prior to the full moon. I had a dollar store paper calendar up on the wall that showed the moon phase. Work was going all right and everything was normal for another 4 weeks. The great part is this area had wild pigs, and my wolf self really seemed to enjoy that. Those things are basically nature's tanks. I really hope he didn't give me some sort of parasite. Then I checked the YouTube channel again. There was a new notification in my subs. This video already had a ton of views. Conspiracy uncovered about the Werewolf of Blue Creek. Must watch. The video picks back up at the same clearing Dad had been at last time. And there goes Dad, out of his sheriff's uniform, in a set of pajama pants and a white t-shirt stepping into frame. While I had been hunting pigs, he was trying to redirect his wolf self away from the town and the people he was sworn to protect. Then the clouds parted and he groaned, and I probably had seen the same cloud bank. Then there was the primal howl, a full octave, maybe even 2 deeper than any noise I'd ever made as a wolf pierced the night. He shape-shifted and was absolutely massive. The same gray fur as me, but easily 3 feet taller. It was like you grabbed a photo of Mr. Olympia, in competition state, and resized and scaled them up. He had forearms in that state that was the size of my chest. The wolf in me was absolutely in awe. If my tail was out, it would be thumping. But then it dawned on me where I was watching this video at. This was Jake and Chloe's channel. Already the jig was up, and the wolf in me suddenly snapped back to attention. He caught what was happening next before my brain could even process it. The muzzle of the handgun came into frame. It was a Magnum revolver done up in stainless steel. Dad, having just changed, never even saw it as they took aim and began to squeeze the trigger. The shot rang out and he staggered. He loosed a primal roar, and out came this gushing fountain of blood. It was a clean hit between the shoulder blades. At the point of impact, the wound turned black and began to burn. Those bastards had figured out how to cast and fire a silver bullet, and evidently, it worked as intended. Running on adrenaline, he jumped and lunged and swiped at the camera, and the gunman took a second shot. This one, it was hard to tell by the frame rate of the video. But the wolf in me was working overtime. I worked overtime. That was my dad, for God's sake, and they had just shot him. Twice. This time it looked like they'd hit him somewhere in the head. There was a scream from behind the camera. My stomach turned. And then the camera panned. Chloe was holding it. Dad's body was convulsing and changing back to his default state. It was like you deflated a beach ball. As his form shrank, he lay naked and dead atop Jake, who had a huge gouge in his left rib from the claw mark. Jake lay half dead, clutching the oversized steel revolver. I could see clearly now it was a Taurus Raging Judge, a typical anti-bear gun. Chloe taunted. "That's for eating Ashley, you fucker!" Then she went to tending to Jake and then talking back into the camera. "We made silver bullets!" Oh God, Jake, are you okay? She wasn't really even trying to help him. She was too intent on making the video. She was showing my father's corpse to the world, farming it for clout, and flagging it up as a horror video. "This monster is Sheriff Albert McNeely, and he's why nobody was doing anything for Ashley Cartwright. He tried to cover it up." Dad was trying to speak, but he was gurgling and convulsing, and then he went still. There was smoke rising from his injuries as Jake kicked his lifeless form off and got to his feet. Then I watched, my blood boiling with rage, as Jake emptied the rest of the cylinder into my father's lifeless form. And this was up on YouTube as dramatic horror? The comments were talking about it being fake and special effects and some sort of ARG, whatever that is. I crushed my phone. I didn't even intend to this time. When I opened my fist, I was holding shards of plastic and silicone and glass. I sat there for a long time with my eyes closed, my mind racing over what the hell had just happened. I heard howling and snarling and pure rage in my inner monologue. When they talk about people who commit murder and see red, yeah, it's real. Finally I broke the rage. I got the wolf under control. I traded his rage for deliberate intent. I stood up and walked to my calendar. 27 days. It won't stand. The last time you ate someone, it was an accident. This won't be an accident. I went out that day and I quit my job. Family emergency, I gotta go. Thank you so much for the opportunity, but my mom needs me really badly right now. And my boss was understanding enough. Then, taking a page from these murderers' playbook, I went to the pawn shop. When I went in, I wore my work gloves. I bought everything I could find that was silver. I dropped most of my final paycheck on it. From there, it was a matter of metallurgy. Right there in my apartment, I got out a drink cooler. I dumped 2 huge bags of kitty play sand into it, and then I spent the entire afternoon with a slotted spoon, mixing the sand with a jug of motor oil. From there, I stepped out on my balcony and I emptied a propane tank. There was some quick work with a Dremel tool that I had bought entirely innocently for the purpose of construction work, and after I lobbed the top off this propane tank, I had a makeshift furnace. 2 rectangular wooden frames got constructed out of scrap 2x4s. Some glues and screws, and some alignment pins, and I had a casting flask. From there, I set up a mirror, and I wanted to talk to the wolf at my kitchen table. He needed someone to be with right now, and that was going to be me. I know you don't like silver, but you saw the video just like I did. I was gluing scraps of cardboard into the shape of a knife, doing papier-mâché, forming a 2-edged blade with a full tang, suitable for a dagger or a spearhead. Think an elongated double-edged triangle. It was a bit large for me, looking almost like a cosplay prop. But for my wolf self, it would work just fine. Those bastards killed our father, and Dad got a claw into Jake. If you're up and about, then he'll be up and about. But remember, it's going to be his first transformation. He'll be feral, no control. We pick off his girlfriend, nobody to work the gun. Be honest with me. Could you work a gun with those big-ass fingers? Nah, I didn't think so. Once she's down, we're going to get him with this. The wolf understood, and for the first time in a long time, the two of us worked together with very deliberate purpose. I lined the inside of this detopped propane tank with ceramic fiber to insulate it. And then I had a rush delivery of a big crucible from Amazon that day. The crucible itself was only like $15. Once the knife form was dry, I did some final carving with a kitchen knife. It was just cardboard, glue, flour, and water after all. Once I was satisfied that the edges were planed up, slowly, methodically I took my time with the shape. This wasn't what I earned an art degree for, but it was a situation I was suddenly thrust into. I prepared a 2-part mold. A coating of baby powder allowed the 2 halves of the mold to come apart and separate without disturbing the oiled-up sand within the box. That means it could hold its shape, and I could take it apart and put it back together again. Then I stepped out on the back balcony and prepared sort of a ghetto workstation. A folding plastic card table with a sheet of ceramic fiber over it to fireproof it. And then atop that was a casting flask with a mold in it. Down on the ground, an insulated steel forge with a big graphite crucible inside sat. From there, I used the tongs not just to handle hot material, but to material that would be hot to me. And I fed that entire crucible full of silver scrap until the whole thing was full with this bright, glowing hot yellow silver that had been blasted with a butane torch until it was well north of 2,000 degrees. It flowed nicely, filling the hole all the way out to the feeder on the other side of the flask and rising a couple of inches into the sand, allowing for shrinkage. After the mold was cool, I had to pop on my goggles and respirator. I'm sure silver dust wasn't good for a normal human, but it was incredibly toxic to me. I sat there on my back patio with sandpaper and a coping saw. I cut the sprue and fill column from the shape of my silver blade. Then, with no other purpose in this world, and very little sense of fatigue, I hand sanded this thing, all the way from 60 grit up to 20,000. If you ask me, I think 2 days passed. I finally brought my knife inside and rinsed it and my clothes off. Work clothes straight to the laundry, me straight to the shower, and now sleep. The next day, I could see my reflection in the polished silver edge of the blade. The wolf over my shoulder seemed apprehensive to touch it. Nah, don't worry, I got you. When the time comes, you make sure you got me too. I popped open an entire bucket of Flex Seal. Then, using my tongs, I held the now cool dagger by its polished tip. I had left a thick hunting or Bowie knife profile to the blade. Not the best slicer, more of a survival knife, but enough material to offset the fact that silver was much softer than steel. The round tang of the blade still had some sand-shaped grains impressed in the metal as a byproduct of the casting process. A dip of the handle into the rubber and a lift to dry. There was a ball-shaped counterweight at the bottom of the tang that helped hold on the thick rubber as it made a first layer. From there, a ton of copper wire got wrapped around it. And the rubber set, and it got redipped a few times. And each time it fully cured, I did another layer. Eventually, I superglued and wrapped the entire rubber handle with a bunch of cloth to make it just a little bit more squeezable. Then, over the cloth, I brushed on a bunch of epoxy to protect the strands of twine that I had wrapped the handle in. What came out was fat, sort of squishy, sort of stone-like. It was like oobleck, and the handle was comically large for me. But it really wasn't for me, not as I sat. I looked in the reflection. You think you can manage that? He flashed me a smile and gave me a clawed thumbs up. Good. Now you need to know what you're in for. We gotta do one quick test. You're gonna hate this, but if you're going to be fighting another lupine, you need to know what your weapons are doing to him. It's kind of like when you're in the police academy and they spray you with pepper spray. So, I raised my left pinky fingertip to this mirror finish, unprotected. Not to the edge of the blade, just the flat. The wolf hated what I was about to do, but right now he couldn't do much to stop me. He whined and whimpered, and after a moment of contact, smoke began to rise from the point where my finger had touched the blade. It sounded like sizzling bacon. I didn't intend to, but somewhere in this process, it was painful enough that I had pissed all in my pants and convulsed a lot. It was like a mix between being tortured with a car cigarette lighter and a taser, all at the same time. My one fingertip was burned black, but after a rinse it was more like a red sore, like I had touched a hot stove. I treated it with some Neosporin before bandaging it. Human me would have to heal that injury manually. And honestly, after it settled down, the wolf and I were both okay with it, because now we understood what our weapon would do. I changed clothes and I got cleaned up, and from there it was just a matter of making an unannounced arrival back to Cold Creek. What the hell do you mean, can you eat them? What kind of question is that? No, friend, no leftovers. You saw what they did to our father. Nobody does that and gets away with it. And for damn sure nobody does that and farms it for internet clout. I wrapped the weapon in a sheet of painter's canvas to cover the blade. I put it in my backpack and threw the backpack in the trunk of my rust bucket. I would need it pretty soon. I plotted out my plan in detail, and I made sure to go over it with Wolf-Me. He's a lot sharper than he lets on, even though he doesn't speak. There was one road between Jake's house and the hospital. Jake was newly turned. And the follow-up videos showed Chloe at his house hanging out after work doing Q&A and milking my father's murder for internet points. I wondered if they even knew Ashley. It was disgusting. But it solidified my plan. He would no doubt get her to drive him to the hospital as he had his first transformation. Because, of course, he was going to be an idiot and turn into a werewolf in public. From there, I got more detailed lunar timings down. I made sure they all agreed with each other at our particular line of latitude and longitude. Lunar timing, a full moon. A full moon is not "it happened tonight." A full moon is "it happened at a particular minute." The minute mattered to a new werewolf. Your first change was a very, very brief one. As you matured, you could start the transformation a little early, and you could extend it all the way to sunrise. I would need to be in place, already wolfed out and ready to go with a 2-hour head start. This was a quiet country road. It was paved, but had no shoulders. I made the wolf focus up as I put on headphones, and I played the sound of that particular truck engine on repeat from several YouTube videos. He got it. I could tell he was catching on because my leg involuntarily bounced on the carpeted floor. A few days before the full moon, I slipped back into town under cover of darkness. I ditched my car at the hunting cabin, and I proceeded on foot through the familiar forest to the backyard of my family home. Sometime before his passing, Dad had replaced the lock and latch on the door of the tool shed. I saw it as I ran my hand across the lock. Then I used my best stealth and I slipped up to the back porch. If Dad did what I think he did, yep, up comes the ceramic frog, and there's the key to the new lock. As I did so, I heard my mom. She was on the back porch swing in her bathrobe, quiet as a phantom. I had not even perceived her until she spoke. "I guess you got the news." I froze. How long had she been there? "Yeah, I'm so sorry." "No, it's not your fault. But if you're here, then I have a pretty good idea of what you're about to do. I don't want the details." I nodded in understanding. "Yeah, I have to. Dad didn't do anything to deserve that." Mom hugged me hard. "Just be careful, okay?" "I will, but Mom, I have to ask. Why didn't Dad ever turn you?" The question now seemed more pointed than ever. Her gray hair had grown so much thinner in the last month. "Do you want me to do it?" "Son, I'll tell you the same thing I told your father. A great many of the people who I love are on the other side of this life. That is even more true now that your dad is with them. I don't want to keep them waiting for me." There was wisdom in her words, but also her statement made me sort of fearful for her. "You're not going to do anything to yourself, are you?" No, absolutely not. I'll keep living in defiance of the world until my time is up." And with that, Mom walked back into the house. "I love you, son. Do what you have to do, and check in with me when you're done. Despite everything, you're still my son." Mom shut the door and left me to my task. I get why Dad loved her so much. She was no wolf, but her soul was every bit as hard as one, maybe even more so. I returned to my task. In the tool shed, Dad had left police department property. I unlocked the shed and stepped in, and there it was. Dad had left his spike devil in there. It was a telescopic thing. A collection of steel hinges with a bunch of upwards pointing spikes. The bottom of the spike strip had a heavy weight on it. The idea was to swing it out in front of a car and stop a high-speed chase. I don't know as though my sleepy little town had ever had a high-speed chase. Dad never seemed to need it for work. I scoped out a spot a few miles from Jake's house. It was a particularly lonely stretch of dark highway that immediately touched the forest. No street lights, no town lights for another mile or two. This was going to be my spot. I dragged out brush, I dragged out downed trees, I dragged out rocks. Everything the forest could provide to me got arranged just like I was setting up a duck blind for hunting season. Just near the ditch, just before the forest began, I had myself a spot of cover now. I could comfortably take a seat behind this blind and entirely hide myself with ease. I shut my eyes and I let the wolf listen. The night was gonna be dark and he had to use his ears for this. A car passed every 20 or 30 minutes or so, and this was early evening, people getting off from work. After way too long of a pause, and being half asleep, the wolf snapped to attention. My hand moved on its own. I grasped the dagger by its handle. I opened my eyes and I looked. And there went Jake's truck down the road. The wolf had picked out the sound of the engine from the conditioning I had given him. Jake and Chloe were both on the bench of this Chevy S10, and they didn't see me. Jake was driving, and Chloe was in the passenger seat, messing with her hair in the vanity mirror. The wolf in me was so much more than ready. The night finally came. I hit that segment of forest, and I brought my hardware with me, just as sundown on that cold December night. At the first rays of moonlight at 6 p.m., I let the wolf out. The true full moon wouldn't hit until a little before 11. The wolf was anxious as he hid behind our makeshift blind, and it was a little small for him, but he rolled his shoulders in, and he ripped up some poor bush and threw it on top of it just to be sure. He unwrapped the canvas and showed off the dagger, and he cast me a glance in the faint moonlight. Yeah, I got you here. Be ready for game time. No mistakes. Just like they did to Dad, use the element of surprise. Jake, as a human, he's bigger than my default form. I dare wager as a wolf he's going to be bigger than you. You're going to have to outdance him. He's going to be brand new, stumbling, coughing, wheezing, lashing out. We use that. And the wolf nodded in understanding. He got the strip of cloth and he loosely tied himself a belt and a scabbard in the darkness. He was being as gentle as he could with those massive claws to not rip the fabric. Then he sheathed the dagger at his side. I had to coach him on how to tie knots in the fabric as he worked, but we were in perfect sync. It was like playing pirates as a kid. You needed a way to carry your wooden sword. We were working together as a team. The wolf spun his head sharply at 10:38 p.m. His hearing was like a razor. Even over the roar of the motor of the truck, we could hear Chloe and Jake talking loudly, even beyond the effect of the phase shift of the vehicle. That's right, chat, it's happening. We are on our way to Gall's Memorial right now, just to be sure. Jake was groaning in the passenger seat. Chloe, just hurry. Jack can meet you there. I could pick up on a subtle snarl in his tone. Are you kidding me? They were going to live stream his first transformation? No, this ends here. My wolf self snarled and snapped his teeth. Then he slung the spike strip across the road. It fluttered out gracefully and blocked the highway. Then he ducked back behind the makeshift blind and clutched the dagger. There were 4 distinct bangs as the truck rolled right over the spike strip on the dark road. What was that? Chloe slowed down. She was driving, obviously, since Jake was incapacitated, and she put on the brake lights. Now, hard. I charged at full speed and shoulder barged the passenger side of the vehicle. My looping form made eye contact with Jake. The door deformed, and the vehicle rocked up on two wheels. The wolf caught it by the bottom of its frame before it could fall, and did his best deadlift until the rest of the truck went over. The whole thing flipped ass end up, and now it was on the driver's side down, with Jake suspended in the air by his seatbelt. Chloe, of course, was screaming in terror and in hysterics inside, and Jake was groaning but confused. Wolf Me brought out one claw, reached through the crushed aluminum of the door frame, and ripped it off its hinges. He chucked the entire door like a frisbee into the woods. Then he snatched Jake by the collar, slid his seatbelt, and hurled him hard like a beanbag against a tree. The tree snapped on impact, and Jake, perhaps sensing what was coming, he had managed to get the glove compartment open. The massive Magnum revolver that they had used to murder our father fell out and landed in Chloe's lap. She was still screaming and waving her arms around, but she grabbed it and prioritized lifting her phone with the light turned on before she took aim at me. Too slow. Nobody home. She let a shot fire off into the darkness. I began to count for the wolf. 1. 5 left. Do not let her reload. The wolf circled the truck like a shark. He grabbed a downed tree and lobbed it through the windshield at Chloe. She answered with another shot, but both of us missed. The tree went through the front windshield, out the back windshield, and deep into the bed of the truck. 2. 4 left. Keep dancing. Jake was getting to his feet in spite of being hurled like a rag doll. He was covered in hair and retching. The wolf ran by and smacked him hard with a backhand mid-shift, batting him away once more and knocking down yet another tree. The backhand sent him flying some 20 feet, and his jaw was bent at an odd angle. That wouldn't matter in a minute or so, the transformation was already in progress, but it would slow him down. Chloe kicked the windshield and then realized her legs weren't strong enough. She shot it. Then she kicked it again. 3. Halfway. The blonde crawled out of the truck all messed up. She had blood on her, there was windshield glass everywhere, she had the gun shaking in one hand and her phone in the other. During this entire event, she had not stopped streaming. "Chat, there's another one! It's happening right now!" The wolf was so sick of this shit. He fetched a large chunk of asphalt the size of a softball and threw it like a concrete fastball. He didn't hit her gun arm, and he didn't hit her center mass or her head. He hit the phone arm. Her phone went tumbling and bathed the entire area in darkness as it landed, LED light side down. She let out another shot in response, but he had already started to drop prone. The bullet went where he had been standing a moment prior. 4. 2 more. The wolf at this point rushed around in the darkness as Chloe scrambled down to the ground for her phone, clearly the most important thing in a life-threatening situation. She lifted it and came eye to eye with the wolf. He bit down on her gun arm, hard, and I didn't ask him to stop. She began to scream and discharged a shot into the air, wasting it. 5. Last one. Then he began to shake her the way a dog would shake a rag doll. A twist and a snap made her scream and retch in a fever pitch as she discharged the last shot into the darkness. Empty. Bring her down. The wolf pried in the camera and in the light, shaking like a found footage movie to whoever was watching this online. Well, if it was going to be a spectacle, since the secret was out, he went ahead and gave the crowd the action they wanted. A twist of his neck, and he had a radius bone and a degloved arm spurting blood in his maw. Chloe let out this primal scream of the ages as reality hit home on her. The other half of her forearm was dangling and useless. Then, being the showman that he was, he spun her around. The wolf slumped and got next to her face in the camera to make sure he was helping with the selfie. Then, as he held her tight, he hunched, her severed arm still flopping and spurting and being a horrible display in his mouth, and giving the 308 watchers a show. He elbowed her as if to ask, "Is this what you wanted?" And then, with his side eye and his eye contact, he greedily scarfed down and swallowed her arm right in front of her. His throat, my throat, bulged as her arm slid down into the abyss of that gray-white belly flesh. He licked his lips clean, and then licked her face. This just made Chloe scream even more in absolute terror the entire time. Reality had hit home, and this was going to be a bad night. A roar from the nearby forest caused Wolf Me to cock his head. He bared one claw, and he raked it through Chloe's calf muscles as if to say, "Don't go anywhere." She crumbled to the dark asphalt, gurgling in terror and physical shock. And just then, another wolf, this one with black fur and a bit larger than me, jumped on top of the wrecked vehicle, causing the aluminum frame to sag. He started slashing at us. There he is. Round 2. Wolf Me was ready and drew the silver dagger from his waist. Then he began to bob and weave. As expected, Jake was bigger than us, and he was absolutely furious. We found our first opening after he telegraphed a massive overhead swing. His claw hit the front driver's side tire of the ruined vehicle. And for all his trouble, he got a sidestep, a quick shank to the armpit, a howl of horrific, hellish pain, and then nobody home when he did his follow-up overhead slash. There were several other slashes and bites to which we had no opening, but eventually he lashed out with this double attack. It was a claw and a bite at the same time. Wolf Me drew in his shoulders and sucked in his gut, sharply exhaling, and he turned sideways like he was trying to squeeze down a hallway or between 2 narrow shelves. Crazy bastard, he managed to get between the reaching claw and the snapping teeth. His right hand was now at Wolf Jake's back, and he dug the knife in and ran it all the way from Jake's waistline, up his back, around his trap muscle, and out through the top. It left this huge burning gash of ash and hellfire, and it caused Jake to roar with some primal fury as one of his arms fell useless. Wolf Jake, despite that, took the opportunity to bite down on our throat. For his trouble, he got a hard shove from our offhand, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 deep gouges to his abdomen and to his chest with the dagger, each one of which left behind cinders and ashes and horrific 5th-degree burns. His insides were spilling out and burning up there on the asphalt. Even if he didn't want to, he was going to scream in pain, which meant he was going to spit us out. His bite drew blood, and his good hand tried to hold his intestines in. Wolf Me took the other opening. He went up from where he was standing and shoved the dagger through Wolf Jake's lower jaw and buried it into the rubbery mandible muscles, all the way up to the handle. Then he twisted and pulled it sideways through the jawbone. This is where the limitations of silver metal finally showed, and the dagger snapped off from its tang. That wasn't necessarily a bad thing, though, because it was still in there and burning around. The black-furred wolf at this point had no Adam's apple, and was snarling and gurgling, and he dropped to his knees. Don't stop, he's not dead yet. The other werewolf was attempting to get the silver out, because every moment it was in there, it was poisoning him and burning him and doing more damage. I suppose eventually it would burn its way out, like a cigarette lighter would burn through a t-shirt. While all of that chaos was going on, Wolf Me walked up to the bed of this ruined truck, and he ripped one of the metal cargo tie-down bars from the bed. Yeah, that might work. Then, as hard as he could, like he was swinging for the fences in a baseball game, he bashed Wolf Jake in the back of the head so hard that this half-inch piece of steel rebarb wrapped all the way around that skull. It turned from steel to something more like a noodle or a balloon animal. Then Wolf Me grabbed the bar by both ends and began to brutally pull it tight. Think about wrapping a bread tie around the end of the plastic container. Right there, on top of Chloe, live stream still on her phone from her good arm, still broadcasting to the world, foot pressed to Jake's back, his eyes bulging out in her face, and I think he actually ejected one on her. The camera got a good view of the iron as it was drawn like a string, effectively a giant piece of garrote wire. Wolf Jake snarled and struggled for a moment and slapped and gurgled as the metal passed over his tongue, to the back of his maw, through his head, and finally pulled all the way tight, severing the top of his skull from his spinal column. With that, he fell face down, spraying a huge arterial spray all over Chloe. His form retched and convulsed and twitched around like you just shot an animal, and it started to shrivel and turn back human. She was in shock, but at that sight, she managed to raise her eyebrows and scream once more. She tried to stand on her ruined legs, but if she couldn't support her own weight, she certainly couldn't support herself and her boyfriend. No progress was made. My lupine alter ego gave me a knowing look in the glass of the busted driver's seat mirror. It was now bent at a right angle and looking up at us. I answered back, "I promised you no leftovers, and I sure as hell am not going to try to stop you right now." With that, he began to feed, greedily scarfing down broken bones, huge chunks of meat, organs, entrails. He pulled, he twisted, he snapped, he bit, he chewed. And he was a rude eater with his maw open, showing off to the camera the entire time. Chloe was alive for a lot of it, and the stream was still going with the view count booming into 4 digits. Finally, he listened to her begging. Our hearing was better than most, and as she choked on blood and was forced to watch him scarf down most of her lover, as well as enduring having one of her legs removed and eaten in front of her like she was a Thanksgiving turkey, she spat blood at him.
Finish it.
Kind of impressive she managed to choke that out. But he remembered how the pair had acted and made a show of it and a spectacle of it, and how they had acted like they had just won, the state championship football game and were in the parade after they murdered our father. He gave her wish. But he propped the camera up, using one of Jake's severed shoes as a sort of kickstand on top of the heap of gore. He opened his maw wide and tipped his head sideways around both sides of the back of Chloe's head so she was looking right into the camera, and he was looking around the side of her ear at it. Then, looking right into the eye contact of her viewers, he flashed a peace sign with a clawed hand and closed his jaws. There was this sickening kind of crunch and a vertical spray. Think about biting into something like an orange that's too juicy, how fluid shoots out the sides of your mouth. It was that, but sideways. He picked the phone up, opened his blood and gore-soaked maw wide, and dropped it down his gullet with a single swallow. The stream was still going, mind you, so Wolf-Me gave the entire world a very detailed werewolf endoscopy, finally plopping the device, with its LED lights still on, into an acid-filled gut that had broken down bones and strips of unidentified flesh, mixed with all of this horrific bubbling yellow stomach acid. The phone broadcast for about 10 or 15 seconds in there before it shorted out. I really hoped that battery pack would be Wolf-Me's problem and not mine. Then he kept on feeding in relative peace for another hour until he was licking a pool of coppery blood from the asphalt. No clothes, no bones, no items. He had used Jake's shredded clothing from the transformation as a sort of macabre napkin before tossing it into the truck. Then he pissed all over the vehicle to claim his territory. He slit the gas tank with a claw, and then he depressed the cigarette lighter. "Oh, we're adding arson to the list of crimes tonight." He gave me a look in the broken rearview mirror as he leaned into the cab, as if to say, "Hell yeah, we are." Then he took the red-hot lighter and tossed it atop the trail of gasoline, causing it to ignite. He sprinted away, grabbed a spike strip, grabbed what remained of my clothing, and vanished into the forest. He returned to the hunting cabin, licking his fur clean, cleaning himself and massaging a jelly-like belly full of bones down his distended gut, content and entirely consuming these murderers. But the night wasn't done, and we weren't going back for a while. There was another matter to attend to now. He sniffed at the air and picked up on the faintest hint of Dad's pheromones. It sort of painted the sky like a sixth sense. Like a tutorial arrow from a video game, spanning over 3D space. He struggled a bit, but opened the driver's side door of our car, using his giant clawed fingers. Then he pulled the trunk release and went around to the back. He fetched a jerry can of gasoline, because we'd already started one fire tonight, a pack of the old man's brand of smokes, and a lighter. The wolf made his way into the forest, the scent getting more and more obvious as we got out away from our camp. The old man had migrated to avoid these two, entirely shifting his patterns, and yet somehow they had found him. After 2 hours in the woods of fast walking, I couldn't help but notice that Wolf-Me was noticeably larger. He had digested his meal and grown significantly. His muscles were larger, he stood almost a foot taller, even his waistline was a little bit chubby. He stood next to a particularly reflective puddle of maybe ice, maybe water, that cold winter night, and glanced at me in the reflection. I guess we leveled up, didn't we? He flashed a thumbs up at me in the reflection. It was nice to get along with him. Then, without missing a beat, he hiked his tail and proceeded to empty his digestive system all over a tree, leaving the lovers behind in this huge, foul-smelling pile to be washed away by the elements. It was certainly no less ceremonious than what they had done to our father. He kicked dirt behind himself and continued to walk without a second glance. We found a clearing from the video where Dad had died. There was a stench of carrion in the air. The wolf knelt next to a pile of bones and decayed fabric. He reached into Dad's shirt pocket and found the highly polished Zippo lighter. The wolf sat it down so my reflection could look too. Now, Dad was never the sentimental type, too much wolf in him, but I appreciated how my lupine alter ego at least let me grieve with him. We hadn't got to do that yet over the last month. Dad, I am so sorry. This wasn't your fault. But I want you to know that we got them. They'll never do that again. Thank you so much for everything. All right, big guy. Dad wouldn't want you to just sit around and cry. Funeral pyre. It's the least we can do. The wolf got into a defensive stance as a red-furred werewolf stepped out of the opposite side of the dense undergrowth. This one had breasts. It was female. And the red fur had a gray muzzle. Clearly she was older. It raised both hands and slowly shook its head from side to side as if to say, I'm not a threat. I think she might be a friend. Show her what we're doing. Wolf Me raised the gasoline jug. She nodded in agreement and got closer, but not too close. Together, we doused Dad's bones and sparked off the flame. Both of us sat in silence for a while. Then she began this really mournful howl. My alter ego joined in, and across the forest, I could hear other canines howling. Not sure if they were like us, but they certainly joined in. We howled at the moon like that for hours until sunrise. And because this was December, the sun didn't break through until almost 7:30 that day. Dad's bones hadn't completely burned, but as it turned out, our failed cremation wasn't a bad thing. When day broke, and the lycanthropy receded, I wasn't the only living human in that clearing. Miss Clara, the sheriff's office clerk who had taken my call to tip off Dad, she was there, naked and seated on the leaves. She broke the silence first. Your father was a good man. I never told anyone this. And if you ask me about it outside of this forest, I'll deny every word of it. One day, years ago, back in the late 1970s, you weren't even thought of yet. He was still dating your mother. Him and I were partners, rookie cops in this town. We rode out to a domestic violence call. Your dad knocked on the front door and stepped aside, but obviously he's faster than I was at the time. That door exploded when the drunken husband inside let loose with a shotgun full of double-aught buck. I eyed her naked and old form, and yeah, right there, all over her neck and chest, there were these huge scars. It blew out part of my carotid artery, and my shoulder hung by a thread. By all means, right then and there, I should have died. I was face up on the porch, seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Then, picture of calm composure, your dad knelt down and gave me a bite on the neck and this wink. He radioed in for a medevac and then stepped into that house. I don't know what he did to that husband. I know we never heard from that household again. It went dark then. I woke up in a hospital 4 days later with doctors talking about a miracle. He was sat in this straight-back chair in my hospital room like a guard dog. I had to wait to change tonight to track his position. I saw the video those two posted, but my nose doesn't work so well when I'm not of, canine persuasion. I was stunned. I just sort of stared at her. Were there other wolves about that I had no clue of? Now, before you ask, no, him and I were never lovers or anything. He was loyal to the bone to your mother. There's a few of us around in the city government. Never him losing his cool or baring his fangs. Cancer, heart disease, automobile wreck, fall from a rooftop with a broken spine. I will tell you this. None of us saw you tonight. You were never here. And you died at a house party about 6 months ago. Nobody is coming for you or your mother. I'm going to go get some clothes at my place because it's freaking cold out here. My husband and I own a cattle farm not so far from here. When I get back to town, I can show the other cops how to get here. Your mom's going to get her closure. And your little funeral pyre looks like the bad guys tried to dispose of the body. Given the smell of blood on your breath, I suspect the actual bad guys will never be found. It's a lot of paperwork, but it's the right thing to do. Come on, I have a bathrobe that'll fit you at my place. And so that was it. I skipped town. After changing my face and visiting Dad's memorial service, of course. Several of the folks in that crowd, the chief of police, 2 members of the city council, and several of the local business owners, they all cast extra reflections in the polished brass police badges as they walked by Dad's photograph, and they all seemed to linger just a little longer than everyone else next to the closed coffin. My bags are packed and I should go now. It's been nice to get this off my chest. The wolf and I are going to find someplace quiet to settle down, far from here. Someplace with forests and fields and not too many people. I'll do my best to try to help people, but I'm not sure I can be in the emergency services. Ask any of them and they'll tell you way too many stupid things happen on the night of a full moon. And given my predisposition, I can't really do much on the night of a full moon. If there's other cryptids out there who wouldn't mind some company, drop me a comment down below this post. I might check in on you. Don't worry, I won't bite. Unless you're, dying and that's the only way to fix it. Well, if you're still here with me, thank you so much for sitting through my original content. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe on the way out the door. It helps more than you know. Thanks so much, have a wonderful week, and I will catch you in the next one.